Welcome back, everyone. Hi again. Thanks for being here. Today I want to do a video about books that I bought because of BookTube. So BookTube made me buy it video. There's a lot of books that I bought because it was suggested by a booktuber that I followed, and these are just a few that I've really loved or just absolutely hated, and I'm not ashamed to say it. So without further ado, let us begin. All right, so the first book that BookTube made me buy was TheIlluminae Files series. I don't remember who started talking about this first, but the reason why I got it initially was because of the covers. They're so pretty. I ran and bought all of them very quickly without truly understanding what was going on. And then I just knew that they were science fiction, and I got them all bargain priced. So the first two, Illuminae and Gemina, I got for like $5, and Obsidio I got maybe for 10, probably not even that. And they sat on my shelf for a while. I didn't pick them up, and then when I finally decided to do it, I realized what everybody meant when they said it's mixed media. And I really didn't like that. It definitely wasn't something, though, no. I think I made it to probably not even 50 pages in before I was like, I can't do this. But I randomly decided to listen to this as an audiobook, and I would absolutely suggest it that way. So Illuminae is, like I said, a science fiction, like young adult series. I believe it's considered young adult, and basically there is this illegal mining happening on a specific planet, and this huge corporation decides to destroy it. And for the people that made it off of the planet, they are fleeing the corporation that's still following them throughout space. There's a lot of other stuff going on in this as well. Basically, there's some kind of disease that's running through the plane itself. There's an AI that is kind of sentient, I believe, that I think, you know, what happens mostly with AI is that they become like, I can kill people. Maybe not. I would like to save these people. And then subsequently, like, what is kind of happening with the Illuminae files, like the logs and everything that are kind of being presented at the end of the book. So with that being said, I ended up really enjoying this series because I listened to it on audiobook, and I would absolutely suggest listening to it on audiobook if you can. I thought that the narrators were really awesome. There's different narrators, there's different accents, there's different characters, and I just think they did a fabulous job with this series in that way. So this was 5 out of 5 that BookTube made me buy. Second series that BookTube made me buy was the Three Dark Crown series. I have the last book because I didn't feel like digging through it to get the first one, but this is a series that I ended up absolutely loving. This was something I'm happy that I bought because of BookTube. This story is about 3 sisters who grow up separately within the same island, and they are supposed to harness their own kind of magic, their own type of skill, and in the end, when they reach a certain age, they're going to fight to the death, and then that sister will become the queen of the island. And it's so good. The final book, the last one, I actually stayed up till 5 o'clock in the morning to finish. I really love the characters. I love all 3 sisters, except for Catherine. I'm sorry, like, that girl was fucked up. So one thing I really liked about this series, though, was that I didn't realize that it was going to be 4 books instead of just 3. And one thing I really enjoyed was that the 3rd book was not just useless filler, in my opinion. I mean, technically, there's a little bit of filler going on when 2 of the sisters are doing their thing elsewhere. But I find that, like, there are some books that there's this one book in a series when it's not just a trilogy that it's just kind of, I didn't necessarily need to read this. but here we are. This was not one of them. Every single book did it for me. I love the characters, and I absolutely want to reread this because it just was paced really well, in my opinion. The climax, or you know, the cliffhanger at the end of book 1 was amazing to me. I did not see that coming, and every time after that, I just really liked where she took the characters themselves. So definitely glad BookTube made me buy this. So this is not a series, this is just a standalone, but BookTube made me get Red, White, and Royal Blue. And this is a book I absolutely did not like. I don't remember who was talking about this book, but there was quite a few booktubers that I was following at the time who said that they loved it. It was so great. And then I guess there were some times where I felt like it was just kind of a generic, like, oh yeah, it's good, but I didn't really get a lot more than that. So I decided to pick this up randomly, and wow, I think I rated this maybe 2 stars. I can't remember what I rated it on Goodreads, but just not my thing. So this is about 2 young men. One's name is Alex. He's the son of the President of the United States, and the other one is named Henry, and he's the Prince of England, but he's like the second son. So he's like, who is that? Prince Harry. And I mean, interestingly enough, you know, but I could not get past how much I hated Alex as a character in this book. He was insufferable, in my opinion. I mean, besides the fact that they're both the sons of 2 like world leaders, they have to interact and be friends because of this thing that Alex makes happen. That's why I don't like Alex. But the reason why it just lost me was because Alex as a character is just so frustrating to deal with. I think these guys are both supposed to be 21. I mean, Alex is drinking, so I assume. But Alex hates Henry because of some non-issue that I think most normal people would be like, oh, it really wasn't that big of a deal. But he's secretly in love with him, and that means that he's like very bratty towards him whenever he sees him. Henry apparently has always liked him since he first saw him, but you know, he can't act on anything, so he can't be openly gay because of his life as the Prince of England. You know, they expect him to be straight, carry on the name, whatever. So you kind of get where we're going here, but Alex is just so frustrating to deal with. Just the initial reason why he doesn't like Henry is annoying. The way that he treats Henry half the time is annoying. The fact that even in this book, it's acknowledged that even though Alex and his sister are a little bit more of modern kids of the president, so they're almost, in my opinion, it kind of seemed like they weren't social media influencers, but they were, I just kind of feel like they were encouraged to be more out and open, you know, doing their thing. But Alex always seemed to remind me of George Bush's daughters just partying. I know that he had like wanted to get into politics though, but still, I was like, does he have a drinking problem? He's drinking a lot. But I think, if I remember correctly, his mom is the president after Barack Obama. And even he mentions like Obama's daughters and like how there is an expectation of how you're supposed to be perceived to the American people. And yet he can't understand why Henry, the Prince of England, okay, something we know as a real like thing, knows that there's an expectation of how they look and act, and can't possibly understand, well, why do you care what people think of you? What are you talking about? That just didn't make any sense to me. So his like things that he would complain about were just very, very frustrating. And then the other part of this that I really just hated was his mother's opponent. Where did that come from? So if you haven't read the book, skip this part because it's a spoiler. But the opponent is basically a pedophile preying on young men, and we just gloss over that. It was just a very weird, I thought it was a weird thing to put in there, And I didn't really get it, because it's always this lingering thing of like, who's trying to expose the kids or expose Alex and all this other stuff. And it's this older white conservative man who apparently was trying to assault children. I don't know. Just interesting choice. So this is something I'm not happy that BookTube made me buy. The next book that BookTube made me buy was Scythe, and this was something I was actually happy that I got into, although I have not finished this series. I've only read the first book, but I do intend on reading the second and third. So I started reading this because Reagan from Peru's Project, I think that's it, because she started talking about this and she was raving about it and how much she loved this book. She mentioned this in several different reviews or hauls or whatever. And I was like, okay, let me get this a try. And it's actually a really cool concept that, you know, years in the future, we've gotten to a point where people don't die naturally. And there are people within society who basically become scythes or, you know, walking grim reapers, and they take people's lives. And 2 kids are apprenticing under a scythe who, something happens to that person. Now they have to fight against each other. They're no longer partners, but they are adversaries against each other, and they end up under 2 new sides who are completely different. And it was a very good book. I definitely would recommend it. Honestly, it's also pretty sad. One of the sides is like a mass murderer. It's very disgusting how obsessed he is with death. He thinks that it's, you know, artful to, you know, I know it's not really committing a crime, but to kill people in a way that's just horrible. And the psychological damage people end up experiencing working for him is very, very sad. So there's a lot of things I really liked about this book. I really like the 2 characters. I like the way it ended. The whole premise is really interesting, and I absolutely want to finish this series. So in conclusion, this was definitely something I was glad BookTube made me buy. So the next series that I got because of BookTube was the Ember and the Ashes series. I have read all 3 books so far, and I do want to finish it with the 4th novel. But you know how earlier I mentioned that there's these series sometimes where there's a 3rd book and you didn't realize it wasn't the end, and it seemed like it was very much just filler? That's how I felt about Reaper at the Gate. So I actually really ended up liking this series. I loved the first book. I know this isn't the first book, but I don't know why I put this one. I don't know why I picked this one, but anyway. I really loved the first book. I loved the characters. I loved the world and everything about it. But the 3rd book, Reaper at the Gates, was a really big disappointment. I still would rate this series really high because I actually really enjoyed it. But I was very disappointed with where she took one of the characters. And I'm not really sure where the story's going anymore, but I'm still going to keep reading it. So, An Ember in the Ashes series follows 2 perspectives, and it's Leia and Elias. Leia's brother was just kidnapped by the Empire, and Elias is the son of one of like the big people that is in the Empire. He's in the army, and he really hates being there, and Leia is trying to work with the revolutionary groups to overthrow the Empire, to figure out what's going on with her brother and where he is. And honestly, like I said, I think the first book is actually really, really amazing. It is, I guess you could say it's a bit slow paced, but not in a bad way. And the second book was also really good to me. Like I said, Reaper at the Gates, not my favorite, but I still will absolutely continue the series. So with that being said, I'm glad that BookTube made me buy this. The next book that I bought because of BookTube was Truthwitch. I am pretty sure the reason why I got into this was because Sam from Thoughts on Tomes like raved about this book and has continued to rave about every book in the series. And I did really like this. I do really like this. I'm not really someone who starts a book and like waits, you know? I think the thing that really hurt me starting this series was I got it, when the book first came out, and then I had to wait. And every new book that came out, I almost completely forgot everything that happened in the first book. So that was really disappointing now that I think back to it, because I think I would have consistently liked this series if I hadn't, maybe if I picked up the book before and reread it so I could know what the hell is going on. And I thought, oh, I'll just look at my notes from when I wrote about it in my book journal, because I have a book journal. And every time I wrote, I had to remember what's happening and would try to recount what was going on, but I just realized I was not remembering anything. But this series starts off with Safia and Isolde. They're best friends. One is a Truthwitch, one is a Threadwitch. And while they both want to get out and be free, unfortunately, Safia is still something, and she's being tracked by a Blood Witch, I believe. I think so. A Blood Witch is after her. And then Isolde she's also being tracked. And that's the other thing. The storyline with Isolde is still super confusing to me, and I really do need to reread the series because I still don't really know what's going on with her. So yeah. Anyway, I'm pretty sure I rated this book like 4 stars, and I really did not like Scythe. I did not realize what that book was actually going to be, so I went into it thinking it would be something completely different, and did not enjoy it. But overall, I'd say that this series is like 4 stars for me, maybe like 3.5 to 4 stars. I still would recommend it, but for me personally, I want to reread it, and I'm probably going to have to take notes because there's so many different people now in the series that I don't even remember anyone. I only remember Safia and Isolde and kind of the Blood Witch from the Blood Witch. That's really it. But I would definitely recommend it. And to be fair, I am glad that I bought this. A BookTube made me buy this. But yeah, it's not my favorite, but it's definitely not my least favorite. Next is a series that I was absolutely obsessed with. I think that I consumed all of these books, honestly, one after the other, and that was the Falling Kingdom series. Whew. Again, this was another thing that I saw reviewed and talked about by Reagan, and I just happened, I think when I first heard about it, because I did watch some of her old videos when I first got into her after I'd literally caught up to everything that was new. And I think the reason why I started to pick this up was the last and final book was coming out. So I was like, oh cool, I won't have to wait for any new book, really. And every single book that was a hardcover copy was bargain at Books A Million. So I don't think I paid full price for any of these until the last book, and I still tried to get that like on Prime, so it's a little less about that. But I love this series, and I absolutely want to reread this because it was so fucking good. There's a lot of different things going on in here, and I just love it. I don't even know what else to say. Like, this is, how would I describe this? So this is definitely a YA fantasy. A lot of angstiness going on. And if you want to talk about enemies to lovers, there's so much of, I think everybody hates each other before they get together in this, if I remember correctly. Almost everyone hates each other first. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. So Fallen Kingdoms follows like 4 different young people who are from 3 different kingdoms. Magic is all but forgotten, but there's about to be a battle, there's about to be a war, and drama will ensue. Like I said, I really loved this series. I would reread it in a heartbeat, and I also read Morgan Rhodes' second series, which she's no longer going to continue after the 2 books, which kind of sucks, but also isn't that bad considering I didn't really know where we were going with it. But I read every novella for this series. I would definitely recommend this. So this is a book that I'm glad that BookTube made me buy. And last, but certainly not least, a treasure, something that I love That's just it. Like, you can't tell me anything. Throne of Glass. Don't remember who was talking about this on BookTube when I picked it up, but I got this when I was on my way to Florida to go to Disney, and I'm pretty sure I either completely finished it in that 13-hour car ride, or I was more than halfway done. I could not put this down. I really loved this whole series, and I have to say that my favorite book in the series is Queen of Shadows. I know a lot of people who don't like the series stop at Heir of Fire, and I totally get it. I totally understand why people feel that way if you're just not into the story, but Queen of Shadows is just where it's at for me. I love Throne of Glass so much. So this series follows Selena. She is an assassin. She is called from slavery, basically. She works in like the salt mines as a slave for the Empire, and she's called from there to be the champion of the king for this thing that's happening. I can't remember exactly what's going on, but the whole series is fantastic to me. I really love Throne of Glass, and like I said, Queen of Shadows is my favorite, but ultimately the witches are my absolute favorite group that we hear about. Kingdom of Ash shattered me. I don't know how I survived. I read that on vacation and was just sobbing probably 3 or 4 times throughout the whole book. Like, it's just really hard. really hard. And honestly, my favorite character is Lysandra. I don't know who other people really like, but she's my favorite. And honestly, if I could have had my way, I would have really loved it if Aelin and Lysandra had been together, because talk about enemies to lovers there. That would have been amazing. That is my OTP. I love them. That's what I really would have loved. And maybe if I ever did fan fiction, I would totally do that. I've never done fan fiction or really read fan fiction, but if I ever were to write fanfic, it would be Lysandra and Aelin forever, because I actually love them together. I just love them. I would just love them as a couple. But that's just me. I may be the odd one out. I don't know who everybody else loves, but pretty much every male character in this series can just go away, except for Damien. Like, I don't mind Damien that much. And that's really it. I hate everybody else. I don't mind her. I don't mind Aelin's cousin, but all of the witches, Aelin, Lysandra, they're my faves, and I love them. I like Nesrin, kind of, but they're my favorite. So there you have it. Those are the 8 books series that BookTube made me buy. And you know what? There's only one that I regret. So I feel pretty lucky. Like I've said before, I get pretty lucky with books that I like. I don't tend to read anything that I just absolutely hate. That there's probably 9 times out of the 10, I'm gonna read something that I actually really enjoyed. But yes, I love those, and I will absolutely encourage people to read them. If you like something that's sci-fi, if you like something that's fantasy, even though Red, White, and Royal Blue wasn't really for me, if you like contemporary, you might really like that. And I realize that most of these are young adult, but that's okay, because everybody needs a little young adult every now and then, because most of the time I might be reading something adult fantasy, blah, blah, blah. But these are amazing, and I absolutely recommend them. So thank you so much for watching, and have a good day. Goodbye. Bye.